Hi. Hi, everybody.
Oh, sorry about that. What a lovely audience.
Judd's going to be very happy about that plug.
I know.
I'm going to tell him all about it. So I just want to start, Dr. Albano, with saying we feel so lucky to be here with you. When Anna Winter calls us, this is my impression of when Anna calls us. Hello, Jenni and Lena. Yes, we'll do it. Whatever it is, we're doing it for you. And then she slowly revealed what the project was, and it's something very dear to our heart. Lena, again, has been so vocal about her struggles with OCD and anxiety. I've struggled with anxiety and depression myself. I'm currently on half a Klonopin. It's helping.
We're proud of her. It
you
was the
guys.
right occasion for her to reveal that.
And my son, my 10-year-old son, struggles with it. So we feel really, really honored to be here with you. So thank you for sharing all of this with us. And I just wanted to start the conversation because I think there's so much confusion around anxiety, and part of the shame and stigma is that it's not talked about enough or properly. And so I just wanted to start with sort of your definition of anxiety, because that way we can all be on the same page and talking about the same thing, because we live in a world where anxiety means a lot of things to a lot of different people.
A lot of people are like, I'm so stressed, I'm late for lunch, which is very different than having an anxiety disorder.
Yes.
But you can have an anxiety disorder and also be stressed about
And also be late for lunch.
Yeah,
like you.
correct, like me every day.
Well, I'm having anxiety right now in this venue, but it is not an anxiety disorder, which opens up the point that anxiety is a natural, normal emotion. Too little of it, and you're a sociopath and run for president.
We liked her.
And then too much of it, of course, you take yourself out of your life. So let's just be clear. Anxiety is a normal emotion. And what I like to tell families is that think of anxiety like you're flying on an airplane and you get, one bag to put in the overhead and one that puts under the seat. That's cool. That's anxiety. If your bags are not able to be closed, if they're falling out of the bin, if they're hitting the people in front of you on the head, you're having too much anxiety.
Right.
And kids actually get that. They get that they have to have just enough to motivate them to do things. Complete their homework, apply for internships, talk to the people in class, go and ask somebody out you're attracted to. They get that anxiety is normal.
Right.
But we know when anxiety gets out of bounds. And you have very eloquently talked about it in your book.
Well, that is, so my next question, and this is going to be a one-parter for Lena and one part for you, which is, Lena, tell us how you came to discover your own OCD and how it got diagnosed, because I'm very interested in the progression of care from when Lena was diagnosed, even though she's 11 years old, to when you started working on this project, and so what the difference in treatment might be today.
Right.
So I don't ever remember a time not being anxious. I know a lot of people will say, when it was so great to be a kid, what a carefree moment. I don't remember a single second of being alive where it didn't seem like there was looming disaster. And it wasn't, I did not live in a war zone. I lived in a very happy house. My parents were interacting in a relatively healthy way. And so my anxiety wasn't a reaction to what was happening around me, but it was constant, and it was not always, it was mostly unreasonable. It was mostly focused on things like, tidal waves and leukemia and food poisoning and bad guys. But it was too much. And I think that for probably the first 4 years of my life, my parents sort of thought we've got a kind of quirky and unusual child who has who sometimes tends to have a glass half empty attitude. And it became apparent when I started going to school that it wasn't a normal amount of anxiety, because when I wasn't calling, collect, begging to go home, I was sitting in the nurse's office for the entire second half of the day. I was often dissociative, which is not responsive to my teachers, not responsive to other kids, going into not a catatonic state, but a state where I could hear people, but was so focused on my own looping thoughts, much of which was focused around numbers, feeling as though I could control or fix the anxiety if I were able to repeat certain patterns again and again, and that made it hard for me to interact with other kids. When I was 7, my parents found a therapist for me who was wonderful, who I saw 3 times a week, who talked to me a lot about my anxiety and was able to sort of focus on the idea that I had obsessive thoughts, but it really became extreme when it started to manifest physically as tics and quirks, whether it was checking behind me in even amounts, spinning around, turning on and off light switches. It was keeping my parents awake at night. It was keeping me awake at night. It was making the lives of my teachers very challenging because I had God bless Kathy Ellis, my 3rd grade teacher, who dealt with, every single day, every probably 5 to 10 minutes, I'm dizzy, what do you think that is? I looked in the mirror, my eye is yellow, do you think I have jaundice? I also had I read a lot of historical fiction, so I had a horrifying litany of no longer even relevant diseases that I was convinced I had. And so I went to see a psychopharmacologist in 5th grade who said that he thought I had obsessive compulsive disorder, and his immediate recommendation was medication. And at that time, I said to my parents, I don't want to do it, I'm scared. I feel like it's going to change my personality, or I don't know what I thought it would make harder since my life was already completely impossible, but my fear around it was, like many people, what if it changes my personality? What if I'm no longer, fun to be around? The funny part is I wasn't fun to be around. And it continued to really plague me. And then finally, when I was in 8th grade, when I was 13, my grandmother passed away, and my anxiety reached, having a sort of actual experience with death and illness, my anxiety reached a peak where it wasn't something I could handle anymore. I skipped an essential part of the story, which is that the reason I ended up going to that psychopharmacologist was because I was in the beauty salon with my mom reading a women's magazine, and there was an article like, True Life, I have obsessive compulsive disorder. And I read it, and it was me. It was checking, counting, fears, a compulsion to touch art in museums, which I actually did have. Like, there were several times where I was caught by security guards feeling up the edges of statues, thinking I had to do it. And so showing that article to my parents and my therapist, I said, this is me, this is my experience, and that's how they put me in touch with this doctor. And then when I to make a long story short, starting to take medication, it wasn't the end of the journey, it was the beginning of a different journey, which was the challenge of finding something that I could take and still stay awake and be cogent in school. That didn't have, the first year on medication, I gained 30 pounds, which, as you can imagine, as a 9th grade girl who hasn't grown an inch, is a real pleasure. And I saw a number of psychopharmacologists, all of whom would prescribe without necessarily engaging in the idea that I was in talk therapy, but I remember once my mom mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy to someone, and she said, that would just be like slamming your head against a brick wall. It's not going to do anything.
Okay, that's what I do every day.
Right. So you say in your book, Dr. Albano, start with CBT. That's where you have to start.
Well, the thing of it is, what you're describing, first of all, you're describing exactly what we see in our clinics at the Youth Anxiety Center, across all of our clinics. And we start with children age 3 all the way up. We're primarily focusing with this project on 16 to 28. And the kids are coming in exactly as you're talking about, numbers that they have to be repeating, ways of walking in and out of doorways, touching things and feeling the compulsion to do that. There's all kinds of anxieties that get caught up. Social anxiety, the fear of what other people think about me, and you write about this in your book. So everything you're describing is what we work with. The thing of it is, while you were growing up and on this journey and suffering in the way that you were, is when the basic research was just starting. So it's in the 1990s, in the early 2000s, that we really put cognitive behavioral therapy and a certain class of medication, the SSRIs, to the test, specifically to see what works best for obsessive compulsive disorder in children. And then my colleague John Walkup and I, and Maura Rin, who are part of the Youth Anxiety Center, we did the largest study for kids with separation, social anxiety, and generalized anxiety disorder. A similar thing, cognitive behavior therapy, the medication, or placebo. So these things were happening, unfortunately, in terms of the research while you were growing up. Yeah. By 2000, we knew what worked. The problem is getting the message out there, but then also training therapists who have been doing therapy for years and years to change what they're doing and training the new cadre of therapists who are coming out. And that's not easy to do. We have to change attitudes.
Well, I remember the complicated thing was that my therapist, who was very good, was very focused on trying to get to the root of the anxiety. What is happening in your life that's causing this? And the fact is that there were things to be anxious about, but I was also constantly anxious whether the problem had been solved or not. And it was a kind of roving anxiety that would choose a new topic every day. So I maybe would experience 2 to 3 minutes of relief when one problem had been handled before I had focused my energy on the next. And then the issue with medication was that it did. I mean, in some way, I did understand as a 5th grader that it would have an impact on my life. It wasn't like you take a pill and suddenly you go to school full of joy. I also had an incredible amount of shame. Like at camp, the kids who had to wait in line to take medication were freaks. You either were cool and had diabetes, or you had OCD and you were a freak.
Well, don't forget the ADHD kids are bouncing around, but not so much at the girls' camps. They're more at the boys' camps.
Yes, it's true. We didn't have any ADHD girls at my camp.
Yeah,
not that none that were talking about it.
Yeah.
One of the things you say in your book that you stress a lot, which I think is incredibly helpful, is that as parents, your instinct is to really say, don't worry. And you actually, I just want to read, this is the only time I'm going to read from the book, you guys, so don't get annoyed, but I just thought it was so funny, and I need my reading glasses because I'm old.
Which happened to be very chic and would work with her look.
She says, up until now, your first line of defense against worry has probably been to reassure your child that there's nothing to worry about. How's that been working out for you? Everyone, if you haven't read this book, I cannot recommend it enough.
I do have to say, in defense of my parents, they never once told me there was nothing to worry about. My dad would be like, the world's a terrible place. We're all going to die. Some of us sooner than others. My mom was like, yeah, when I go out, I do think a lot of people are looking at me and they don't like what I look like. Like she was fully...
Well, they're exposure therapists, you just didn't know it.
Yes,
right?
perfect.
So they were on the right track.
Perfect.
But the thing about anxiety, a couple of things. Kids will suffer with an anxiety disorder for 2 to 7 years before it's recognized.
Right.
So that's one thing. And then again, in the 1990s and the early 2000s, most kids with obsessive compulsive or any kind of anxiety disorder would be treated for the disruption in school, the disruption with the family, not for the anxiety disorder itself.
And one of my favorite stories about my mom is that before they figured out what was going on, I was sent in for testing for ADHD, which if you know me well is sort of a joke because I like to go and focus on one thing for like 14 to 17 hours. And I can sit and have a conversation for as long as is ever necessary. But they brought me in and my mom read the test and the person had said, Lena, a girl of average intelligence. And my mom flipped out and ripped it up. So she was like,
good for her.
How dare you?
Very good. But what I write about, why we wrote the book, and also what we focus on in the Youth Anxiety Center is we're unique. I don't know what your experience was, but typical, especially in New York City, is that, and around the country, therapists lock parents out of the therapy room.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's kind of, when I first moved back to New York City after many years, had my first patient here, a 5-year-old boy. I talked to the mother on the phone to arrange the appointment, and she said, when you're done, walk him out to the driver, please. And I'm like, no, you're coming with him, as is his dad. One of the things I've learned over time is anxiety makes its way into the family system.
Right.
Because you can't watch your 5-year-old suffer and not want to swoop in and comfort them and fix the problem, make them feel better. So that's where, I say, has it been working for you? Because there's a way to do that that helps empower the child. And I give your parents a lot of credit. I mean, because you have to say, yeah, there are things out there. Now, how are you going to deal with it? And so what we do in the Youth Anxiety Center, and the model that I developed over time that's fundamental to all of our treatments, is how to have parents involved in a way that helps take them out of the overprotection and over-reassurance, moves more of this into the child or the young adult's hands to start dealing on their own and use their parents as resources, not as safety people. And that's very important because the longer you have anxiety, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, when it starts and such, the longer it's there, the more disabled you get, you're not only suffering with anxiety, you're falling behind your peers in terms of developmentally, being an independent 8-year-old, or 10-year-old, or 14-year-old, or 24-year-old. You have to get back on developmental track.
And you're falling behind in school because
And you're falling behind
too
in
scared
school.
to go to school.
Well, one of the big things, thank goodness you didn't have school refusal behavior, and that's a serious concomitant of anxiety where kids stop.
School refusal behavior?
Is that where you refuse to go to school?
And you don't.
Well,
Yeah.
She did.
I won the award in 10th grade for most missed days.
Okay, you had some
Yeah,
school refusal
I missed
behavior.
I missed 74 days of 10th grade. It was a testament. I
All
just
right.
heard that gasp. It was
Yeah.
a testament to
Okay.
either the accepting nature of our administrators or the fact they didn't give a shit
Yeah.
that I made it, that I was allowed to move on to 11th grade.
Or they didn't know what to do, too, which is sometimes we find schools don't know what to do when the child is anxious. Because they do. They can say, look, this kid is out of his seat all the time, and blah, he's bopping all over the place. You need a referral for medication for ADHD. But anxiety is silent in a lot of ways. Kids are suffering in silence, and the teachers don't recognize that. And then what happens is it's an insidious process where they start complaining, asking to go to the nurse. They're spending more time outside of class and then eventually more time at home. And there are kids, when school refusal takes over and they literally don't go back to school, it's so hard to turn them around and get them back on track and back in. So I've had youth who have literally, let high school go by and they just never complete it. And it's very sad.
It can also really, you talk so much about the family in this and including the family, but it can really, it can kind of hold the family hostage.
Right.
When you have a child with school refusal, right? Because you'd never know when the phone call is going to come to pick you up. I've had conversations with your mom about this, that you don't know how they'll make it through the day necessarily.
Right, and then what also happens is once the kids start really staying home, and we find school refusal at key times when they first start school, when they're transitioning to a new school, so elementary to middle, middle to high, and we're even seeing it in college. Our Youth Anxiety Center has a large program for the kids who flame out in their first semester of college or can't even get out of bed to go to college. And so what happens there then is the parents don't know what to do and they give up. I have had parents who quit their jobs. One of them stays at home all the time to take care of that youth. And we've had things like they say, well, we'll do homeschooling. Homeschooling is like, forget it. I mean, it's like giving the diabetic candy and just letting them eat. You can't do that because, again, you're taking the child away. They might be more comfortable at home, but they're never going to learn how to meet the challenges of going in and talking to people. Right?
Yeah.
And making your way into the party and staying for as long as you can, but being there for a bit rather than avoiding.
My dad often tells the story. I was in preschool, and by this point I think I was 4.5, and it had become very evident that I had extreme separation anxiety, among other things. And we lived in the neighborhood where I went to preschool, and the bunch of us were, walking in a little mitten line to the park or whatever they do with you. And my dad was having lunch with a friend outside, and he saw me, and he was like, "Fuck, Lena's gonna see me, she's gonna flip out." So he went to try to hide behind the building, but I saw him. My dad was like, "I'm gonna hide," but I saw his friend, and then I was like, put 2 and 2 together, saw my dad around the edge of the building, and he was like, "It's done," and he just had to take me home for the rest of it. There was just no reinserting me with the group once I had seen my dad, which I'm sort of still that way.
Yeah.
So true. When you, Lena, so you experimented with a lot of medication.
Yeah, and something that was really scary was that I had a psychopharmacologist who, I'm no doctor, although I like to think I am, but I know now that what she was doing was over-prescribing for every single symptom that presented itself. So I was on fluvoxamine, which is Luvox, which is an SSRI. Mm-hmm. It wasn't working, and so rather than try a different medication, they were going up and up and up with the dosage to the point where I was on 350 milligrams, which is like enough medication to fell a horse.
Well, everyone's different though, right?
I guess.
Yeah.
And I had put on that 30 pounds, but there was...
I don't think it has to do with body weight.
But then I couldn't stay awake for school, so it was, why don't we give you some Adderall, then you're gonna be able to... That made me feel crazy. We're going to give you some Risperdal so that you're able to sleep. So the combination of things was so, it really, broke me. It really wasn't. I remember one day we lived in Brooklyn, just standing outside our house and like staring at the headlights of sitting outside because I was so mad at my parents for literally no reason, and I'm sorry, parents. And I was standing outside like looking at the headlights of a car, and I just thought like, I could just walk out in front of that car, and then I would never have to worry about this again. And maybe other people can move around on the planet, but I can't do it. And I remember that feeling scaring me enough that I went back inside and said to my parents, we have to do something different because what's happening isn't working.
Yeah. And this is one of the things, is that these studies, fortunately, that have now been done are good guides for physicians, because there's practice guidelines now that help people to understand, but also without having access to cognitive behavioral therapy early, or along the way, the combination of the medication and cognitive behavioral therapy, we've shown has been the best way for 80% of kids who have OCD or an anxiety disorder.
That's so amazing.
You know, but you have to have child psychiatrists or psychiatrists and cognitive behavioral therapists who know what they're doing.
Well, the question is, not to force you to do full doctor duty right now, but I'm 30, and while I've managed to deal with my OCD symptoms so that I can move through the world, they're not gone. I just have ways of managing them. And so there's still a lot happening in my brain all day that the people around me don't and shouldn't know about.
I know.
Jenni does, and it can't be fun. She made a rule that I'm allowed to ask her, she's the only person I'm allowed to obsessively ask, are you mad at me? Which is one of my...
Okay, we're going to talk about that.
I know, now that I read your book,
Okay.
I realize that's bad behavior on my part.
I didn't know. It's been so helpful.
It's not.
But here's
It's not. I'm reinforcing some really bad habits.
Okay,
for you.
we're gonna figure this out.
This is couples therapy, right?
I know.
Yeah.
We love it. But here's a question. In terms of CBT, is it too late for me?
No, absolutely not. I have 80-something-year-old patients, 90-year-old patients. No, absolutely not.
I think you could save all my relationships.
Okay, well, wait, I've read about some of those relationships, Lena, so...
You don't want to save all of them.
Not all of them, but, you know.
Some of the key ones,
Yeah.
I think, could be very helped by that.
But it isn't too late. And this is one of the great things about when you really turn on to a therapist you can resonate with who's doing CBT. We collaborate. It's so different than traditional therapy. I don't know if you realize I don't have as many boundaries as most therapists. I mean, I've already told you about different things in my life. You know, we really get in there because we want a collaboration where we're going to work together, and sort of like a transfer of control in a sense. I'm going to transfer to you the skills I know that are going to be helpful to you. You're going to be using them. We're going to try out what works. We're going to move along hierarchically on the things, from the easier things for you to battle all the way up the ladder to the things that, you know, overwhelm. And to a point, you know, we have to learn, because anxiety is normal. And look, you know, I had a friend who he only colored when he was a kid with a purple crayon. That's all he would do, is use purple. He didn't have OCD, it was his preference.
And his name was Prince.
And and let's mourn him. But you know, there's a little bit of these kinds of, like, whether it's a separation stuff or there's OCD-ish stuff and all, that, you know, we use to our advantage. So we don't want to wipe it all out, but we want you to be in control and you to feel relief and to be able to breathe. Do your yoga, which is really cool that you're doing, and be able to make that work for you in a way that you have relief. So it's not too late. We got to talk, because I know people that can help you. Here are Ellis.
And also, I just want to say, the good news is that things are getting so much better in this world, and getting...
You watched the news today?
Well, no, not our world. The world of anxiety is that, that Lena Dunham has done okay, despite crippling OCD and anxiety. So I do feel like there is tremendous hope, and part of it is, you know, there's this insane stigma and shame around anxiety, and I've seen it my whole life, and I wish that we lived in a world where it was treated like high cholesterol, because it's just as common.
Right.
It has, or if not more, it has different kinds of treatments, sometimes medical, sometimes not. And I think that the shame keeps at least parents, and I'm not sure, I wanted to ask you, but does it keep children from sharing with their friends or with their parents? Because it does seem it's so hard for children to express and for their parents to face.
Well, I have to please appeal to the parents in the audience and anyone watching this who are parents. It's the parents who we have to help them let go of the stigma.
Yeah.
Okay? Because I actually get calls from girls and guys who are coming from the high schools. Dr. Albano, could we move my appointment to Thursday at 4 because my best friend is going to see Dr. Friedel at the same time? You know, they're fine with it.
Yeah.
And actually, I've done programs at the Fieldston School, at the Dalton School, at different places, and the kids want to talk about it. They want to be empowered with having people know it's okay that you have a mental health issue. We have to respect one another and support one another. I mean, I see the friendship that you all have, and I remember in your book writing about you finished something with filming girls, you came home to New York, you felt completely spent, you were home with your parents, and then you went back, and the guy from Oberlin,
Oh, yeah.
right? He came, you know, you and he went riding around. It just seemed to me like, you know what, this is when you have a BFF or you have a friend that you're able to be yourself with and say, you know, I've got anxiety, I've got OCD, I worry all the time. For them to understand that and let you be you is so important, because then you're free to tackle it. Otherwise, you're just constantly keeping it in and trying to hide it and struggle with it.
Well, it's such a gift, because I think all the time that had I not been connected with Jenni, had we not worked with Judd, who's also been very public about his anxiety, it's been focused around food lately, I don't think I would have been able to have this career because of the fact that the pain of trying to keep my fear and stress private would have really killed me. And so it's something that Jenni has said to me over and over when I'll have a panic attack or I'll feel incredibly anxious about something that might be, it's funny, there's certain things that would make other people very anxious that I have no reaction to, and certain things that nobody else would be anxious about that can make my entire day really, really hard to navigate. And Jenni always goes, let go of the shame. The shame isn't helping. That's just an added layer.
See, that's right.
Of
That's
pain.
it. That's
See,
it.
she's really good.
I just read this book this week, you guys.
And when she said that to me, that was such a huge revelation, because she was like, when you have anxiety and then you have shame about your anxiety, you're punishing yourself twice. And so we're all...
Very good.
I know.
Thank you.
She really is a doctor.
Thank you so much. It really makes up for the fact that I let her ask me if she's mad at me all the time. If I'm
By the
mad
way,
at
I've
her.
stopped doing that, because it actually, asking you if you were mad at me started to feel like, I don't know how to explain it, except it felt like selfish and rude. And
No, I think you stopped because someone started asking you if you were mad at them, and you were like, oh, that's annoying.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Someone was like, are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? And I was like, if that's what Jenni's life is like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm over that one. But
That's an interesting thing that you say that somebody else doing the same thing showed you, oh, wait a minute, let me stop. Because a lot of the work that we do at the Youth Anxiety Center are in groups. And some of my groups are here tonight, guys. I'm glad you all came.
Yay! Thank you.
And it is, you know, we have a point where we do work with the youth and their parents. We do individual work, teaching them about skills, and there's medication where needed. But the large part of it is exposure. Exposure therapy is part of CBT, exposing you to the things that prompt your anxiety, get the obsessions and compulsions going, or get you, you know, locking yourself in your house and dropping out of school and such. We put our young adults into groups of 6 to 8 people, and we're working on things together. That social support is so important, and being able to see one another dealing with anxiety and give feedback is so critical. So that's another unique component of what we do at our program, and we're trying to get this out more for other programs to pick it up.
And at what age do those groups start to work?
Any age, probably. We have elementary school groups when we could get them. The thing is getting parents over the stigma across the ages of, but what if there's someone from their school in there? What if there's someone that we know? It's like, well, then they have anxiety too. And it's okay, because they'll be confidential as well as you'll be confidential about this.
And maybe the hope is that it doesn't have to be confidential anymore.
Well,
that's, you know, Lena and I are really noisy. You know, this seems like such an incredible issue to focus on getting noisy about.
Yeah.
And so that people don't feel like they need confidentiality, so that they can talk about it. I mean, it's certainly paved the way for many other issues. And the more, I live in Los Angeles and struggled to find the right therapist for my son and myself, but for my son. And that's crazy to me. Like LA, UCLA,
Right.
come on, people. One of the best hospitals ever. And so we have to get louder.
Yes.
I
we
also
do.
wonder, are you seeing, someone recently told me a story about kids crying at school about the news and needing to have like a meeting with their school psychologist to sort of, I heard that they had to have it explained to them that Donald Trump is actually a dad and a grandpa and he doesn't want to hurt anybody, arguable. But that is, we're living in a time of such increased anxiety in our cultural collective consciousness. What is that doing to kids who have anxiety disorders?
And within families.
Right.
Because, one of the things that we don't have to do is protect our children, I know now, from our anxiety. We can share that, or our business partners. But, but there is this idea that how can we be sensitive in this time, in this world, when we're feeling things and we're going to protests and bringing them to protests and engaging our children in the political climate while still not making them as afraid as maybe even we are.
Right. Well, this is where what we want parents to do is be able to be matter of fact about what's going on, but not transmit anxiety. Let's bear in mind, from the time the infant is born, they resonate with the parent's mood.
Right.
Or their emotional expression, what we call affect. You're angry, they're going to go like this. You're crying, how many times can you think about when your kids were little, and they would, Mommy, they know when you're in a mood. So they pick up anxiety too. So what I tell parents is that we want you to be able to talk about, yes, Daddy's not home yet, or Mommy's not home yet, and they should have been here a half hour ago. Well, you know what? They're probably stuck in traffic. Not, oh my gosh, what's happening? Where are they? I'm so worried. You have to be a problem solver and model that. So what's going on in the world right now is this big meanie is in the White House. But you know what? Look at all the people who are out and expressing what they think. And this is going to help us. This happens in the country where every 4 years we have an election, and we're going to get people active so that hopefully things can turn around the next time there's an election. So you have to be matter of fact like that and give them some information that they can understand for how the situation is unfolding. But we're getting a lot of kids. I have to say, what is one of the saddest things are the young adults who have developmental disabilities, who don't quite have the cognitive resources to understand government and elections and such. They're the ones who are really suffering. And younger kids who don't get that this is, he's going to be voted out or impeached or, however long we have to wait. It's 4 years, I said we were going to go. We said we were going to go there, didn't we? What are we going to do?
We never don't go. We try so hard not to go there
Yeah,
sometimes, and we live there.
You don't usually find a lot of resistance at the 92nd Street Y on these issues.
Yeah, this seems like a safe space.
Yeah, a lot of Jews in the crowd, a lot of sympathetic Jews.
I just don't think we'll be getting his donation now. Anyway.
Well, this is slightly veering away, but we actually covered so many of our questions already. But can you tell us about the adult lives of some untreated children?
Well, yes.
Without making us so anxious.
Yeah,
so-
well,
Because you've already calmed us down, so now we need you to rev us back up.
let's rev back up. Well, this is the sad thing that most of the time people think anxiety is a phase. People are not educated about it, or they also think it's willful. So my son is willfully staying in his room. He's 24 years old. He's playing video games. He doesn't want to leave the house. He's lost all his friends because he's comfortable here. This is what he wants. And he's going to use us, to take care of him until he's ready to get up and walk out one day. And no. He may well be addicted to video games at this point and such, but it's that anxiety was what started this young adult staying away and out of his life. So we see a lot of situations where we call it the failure to launch. They don't get to Oberlin. or they don't get into a training program for some kind of a skilled position or such. They don't go out and get jobs. They just stay at home. It's different than kids who, they're finding their way. They're maybe working part-time or here and there, but they're going out with friends and they're doing things. These kids are really locked in. It becomes a very sad life. And what happens is the parents recognize that, oh my gosh, I almost can't let my kid outlive me, because how is he or she going to survive then for the rest of time? So it becomes very anxiety producing to the family, but also there's a lot of conflict and anger, throwing up their hands. How do we parent a young adult? So it has to happen, because these kids will stay put. And I mean, if you think about, we probably can all search in our minds and think about people we know who moved into the attic apartment upstairs from the parents and they stayed there forever.
Lena made a movie about it.
Yeah, well,
It very nearly could have been me. My parents are so shocked that I don't live at home. Consistently shocked. Another question Jenni and I have, which is in keeping with the idea of what happens when anxiety is untreated, is we have such a problem in this country with bullying in schools, with violence in schools. I mean, with gun violence in schools.
Right.
And I've always thought, I'm not alone in this, that so much of that had to do with the fact that we couldn't talk about the stigma around mental illness. Do you feel as though anxiety and untreated anxiety contributes to the harmful ways that children interact with each other?
Well, it certainly has a role, and is a byproduct. So one of the things that we do see is that you don't have to be the direct recipient of bullying to experience the anxiety of watching someone who gets bullied or knowing what, the alpha people in the class are like. So you certainly can develop anxiety as a result of direct or indirect. And then the other thing too, one of the things I should say is anxiety, we know from research that's been done at the National Institutes of Health, anxiety starts by age 4. And whatever starts, it's oftentimes a phobia. As the child ages, it is the most common diagnosis. I mean, 1 in 4 kids. Over time, it will pick up other anxiety disorders. So OCD picks up generalized anxiety, picks up separation anxiety. By high school, they're becoming depressed. Depression is added in. And then for a significant group, substance abuse starts later. Right. So kids, especially with bullying, they may go to self-medicating with alcohol and things like that if they are so frightened. And then, I have to say, you've said this a couple of times now tonight, that, you felt like this is it, I want to jump in front of a car or something. What got me in and keeps me in this field is the very first youth I saw with anxiety, a 16-year-old, I write about him in this book, who stayed in a bathroom stall at lunch every day during his junior year of high school and never went to an extracurricular, didn't talk to anybody. He just was flooded with social anxiety. And after I interviewed him and, I said, what do you want to do in the next 5 years? What are your plans after high school? And he looked at me and said, Dr. Albano, if these are supposed to be the best years of my life, I don't want to be alive. And it's because of that young man, it was like, wow, that was 1990. This is why I dedicate my career, because a significant group of kids, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, do become suicidal.
Well, it's interesting. People love to say, I don't know why, I'm anxious, but I'm not depressed. Have you guys heard people say that? People love to talk about how they have anxiety, but no, don't worry, I'm just a regular old anxious urban person. I'm not depressed, because depression somehow sounds
is lower on the totem
lower
pole.
on the mental health totem pole. But I had a doctor say to me, it's very hard to separate the two things.
Yes, it is. And it's hard to separate a lot of the mental illnesses because they share symptoms. I mean, anxiety and ADHD actually go hand in hand when kids are young too. Yeah. So it's hard to pull those apart, and that's why we need expert diagnostic evaluations. And it's not just to say, okay, you have social anxiety disorder, you have generalized anxiety, whatever it is. It's to use that then to formulate a really comprehensive, good treatment plan for that individual. Right. Because these are very personalized. Being personalized with medicine and fitting it to that particular child and that family in the context within which they live and breathe and work is important.
If it's this common, Should we be working to get these systems into schools?
Absolutely.
Now
And
that we have this
yes,
great school
absolutely.
person in charge.
Yeah.
Today was a triumph for school districts everywhere.
Yeah. Seems like tomorrow would be a great day to get these systems into school. No, but because if it's truly 1 in 4 kids,
Right.
this is going to affect the entire class.
Yes, that's right. And kids kind of, I ask people to think about it this way. If you would think back to 8th grade and make a list of who you want to come to your birthday party, what I want you to think about then is, first of all, who's on your list? They're going to be the kids who are cool, that you like to hang out with, they're not anxious. Who did you purposefully leave off the list? Those will be the kids who have acting out problems with ADHD, oppositional, they're the ones who like break the piñata and yell at you, haha. And then think about who in your class did you forget to put on one of those lists? Those are often the kids with anxiety. Those are the kids who sneak away with a book and try to lose their thoughts in a book to get control over them, but they're not out on the playground with everybody. Right. Or in some way, they're not a part of the mix. So we have to get into schools because schools help us to identify. The teachers know to some extent, wait a minute, who is it that I'm not recognizing, who isn't asking me for questions or, coming up, who's not at the lunch table mixing it up. Right. Schools are a very important thing. And if I could just add, I know I'm running on, Frances.
No, you're not. I literally, you could read this whole book to us out loud and I would be
She's so
happy.
soothing. She's so soothing.
But one of my colleagues at the Youth Anxiety Center is Francis Lee. He's a neuroscientist. He works with mice. You wouldn't think mice have anxiety disorders, but Francis makes them have anxiety disorders.
I need to hear about how
I
he
have
does
2
that.
dogs on Prozac. We don't need to.
So what he's found is that there may be critical periods where therapies are more readily taken up when they're delivered, but in adolescence, it's tougher for adolescents to do cognitive behavioral therapy or adolescent mice to be deconditioned or habituate to the anxiety unless the contextual, like the environment is such that where the anxiety was conditioned, those elements of the environment are still there when you're deconditioning. So this is why we have to move the family into our treatment as we're doing. Right. We have these exposure groups because we have other kids, so it makes it like school or college or whatever. And we bring our kids out in the environment. Right. I mean, my groups here, they know after this, they're supposed to come up and I'll ask you for autographs and stuff like that. Or we take them out.
I have to go meet my dad, or I absolutely would.
But
we'll find another time.
We take them out into Columbus Circle, and we go around, and they've got to fill out applications. They ask silly questions of people, doing things to challenge their anxiety. Try to get on the bus on Broadway with empty Metro cards, to do the things that contextually they're afraid of, so that they overcome it. And that's a result of Francis's work and ours being put together. Mice meeting bench to bedside, we call it.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Okay, so I have some questions from the audience. Didn't I tell you this would fly by?
Yes.
I can't believe
we need another hour.
No, I have so many more questions.
I have 4 million more questions.
Plus, I think the kind of upsetting thing about tonight is that I came on thinking I was like a sort of cured miracle story, and I'm leaving the stage realizing I need a lot of help.
I know, and that I've been enabling you.
Well, but you're my savior, so I have to figure this out.
Okay, this is a question for Lena. Who has more anxiety, your character on Girls or you?
Good one.
It's a great question. Who has more anxiety, my character on Girls or me? I would say that we have different anxiety, but at the end of the day, I would say it's me only because Hannah has very specific anxiety about what's going to happen to her. Her anxiety is very focused on does this boy like me? Will this job interview go okay? I'm slightly more aware of what's happening on the planet, which gives me more things to worry about. And I care more about how other people feel. So those are added elements. Those are added things to be anxious about. Sometimes actually, when I've had moments of really bad anxiety, I've actually found it very soothing to go, well, I'm just Hannah today, and she has so many fewer problems than I do, and I can just put on this romper and be her and forget about the wider net of, no one's mad at her on Twitter.
We should talk, because now you're entering a different type of disorder. But anyway, we'll talk about that. Okay.
That's just acting.
Yeah, that's just called being an actor.
Which is
It
a kind of disorder, for sure. Is anxiety hereditary?
Well, anxiety does tend to run in families. So, and research at Columbia University years ago shown especially the specific phobias, and within that is especially blood phobia, fainting at the sight of blood or the thought of blood, and then also social phobia. They do tend to run in families. Separately, twin studies have shown in twins, one has it, the other tends to have it.
But
Now,
in the families where like blood phobia runs, they don't know if that's hereditary or if it's just like your mother terrified you to death because
There
she
you
fainted
go.
every time
So
you got a shot or something.
There's probably what we think and what research is really advancing on is that there is a biological predisposition that is inherited to experience the sensations of anxiety, the fight or flight response, and other kinds of sensations more readily in challenging situations. And then that interacts with the environment. The way that maybe there was certain parenting or there was potentially events that happened that cause a person to be more anxious, then also the way the child starts to look at the world and interpret the world on their own, right? Their own cognitive style. So we think anxiety really is, there's a predisposition, but there's an interaction, it's transactional. And what happens too is, let's remember that you are like really high functioning in our terminology.
Yeah.
And you know, I know you suffer, but there's different levels and degrees of the way anxiety comes out. Everyone though, what we have to do with everybody who comes in is look at what are their strengths.
Well, it's so funny you say that because I was diagnosed with OCD, and then when around age 13, and then my first cousin was diagnosed with OCD when he was 13. And I was horrified, obviously, that he was going through that, but was very comforted because it finally made me feel a little less like it was my fault. And he and I were able to really connect over that and have become very close. And something that we found is one place where I feel really happy and safe is on a set. I love working on the set of Girls. I love the busyness, I love the distraction, I love the camaraderie. He came in, interned, and it turned out that he loved it too, and it relieved a lot of his symptoms and his anxiety, and now he's having a very successful career.
He's
thriving. College wasn't right for him, and he had a very hard time getting through high school, but now he's literally rising up the ranks at a sort of unparalleled speed in working in production in New York, and it was amazing to find that we both had the same, very similar symptoms, very similar anxieties, very similar fears, and we're also able to function really well in what for many people would be a very stressful situation.
Right, right.
And we are now able to look back and realize that both of our fathers, who are brothers, have many obsessive compulsive symptoms. My grandmother, I mean, everyone was like, was there so much stuff stored away in her basement when she died? I mean,
Yeah.
she was the most obsessive compulsive hoarder that I could imagine. We just didn't have a term.
You didn't have a term for it.
We said she was a penny pincher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
which is not why you keep soup for 35 years.
no. Well, you know, some of these doomsday people do, but
Yeah,
you know,
no,
yeah.
that wasn't the thing.
This is another question from the audience, and I mean, I think I know the answer because I've been a really good student, but what do you do when your child refuses to see a therapist?
Come in yourself. Come in and see a therapist
I didn't know
about
the answer.
how do I deal with this? So what is it that we can do that, and we actually have groups for parents of young adults to help empower them about how to relate to their young adult, how to set limits, how to then help motivate the young adult. And the same thing with young kids. Come in and seek advice yourself on what to do. And that will help, because we're going to help you change the environment at home, which is going to help prompt the kids to say, okay, I'm going to come and talk to somebody.
Yeah, I think often parents really struggle. This is something I found just by talking to friends, that with so much guilt, because there are so many directions you can take.
Right.
And are you over-treating? Are you under-treating? There's just, you know, a lot of anxiety that comes with that. And so any kind of parent support seems really important.
It is important. You know, one of the things I want to say, because we talked about the family issue, it's not parents' fault. It is definitely not parents' fault. Children aren't born with manuals of operation. Parents are doing the best that they can, and a lot of what happens is it's working on their wanting to make it better for their kids. Parents have to get empowered then on how to help their child. And the thing to know is, I don't think we get many, maybe it's like 1 in 20 youth come in wanting to be in therapy. We're ready to deal with kids, even young adults who don't want to be there,
Right.
and then to partner and work with them as to why it's important to be there for a period of time. I also don't want kids in therapy, even young adults, for the rest of their lives. I want them to make use of the tools we could teach them and then go out and be kids or be young adults and take the world by storm. Not to be, my BFF for the next 30 years, three
Right.
times a week,
Okay, I have more stuff to examine.
And well, first of all, I want to thank Anna for bringing us together.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Anna.
you.
Everyone at the Youth Anxiety Center.
And just if you have just any last words of what we can all do to raise awareness.
We got to keep doing what you've been doing, tweet, write about it, sign up our group and others that we can hook you up with to give talks at schools. And we have a big public education campaign, an education arm of our Youth Anxiety Center. We'll connect you with other centers and communities around the country of anyone watching this, and talk about it. Don't hide with it. Talk about it and bring it out into the open. And go to our website at NYP Youth Anxiety Center.
Amazing.
Great.
And we just want to say to every every young adult who has anxiety who came out tonight, we're just proud of you for coming out to do something and for being so open and honest in a way that I never could have imagined 17 years ago when this started for me. So I wish I could stay and hug you all, but we want to thank you. We're really proud of you.
Lena, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I love meeting you.
Thank you
I'm
all
going to be
so
here
much.
after.
So great.
It's so great.